Welcome to Still In It, a 5-MeO DMT Journeys podcast, where I talk to real people about their 5-MeO experience. Our goal is to bring you honest and diverse perspectives about what this medicine is all about. I'm your host, Jessie, and I'm excited to have you along for the ride. So hop in and enjoy as we discuss what preparation, ceremony, and integration look like. This podcast is sponsored by Enfold, offering safe and sacred experiences in British Columbia. To learn more, visit enfold.org. That is enfold.org. Or click the link in the show notes. And now, without further ado, I hope you enjoy today's episode. Welcome, Haitham, to the Enfold podcast. What we like to start off with is an anchoring question for our listeners. If you don't mind sharing briefly a bit about yourself and how you got called to this medicine.
Hi, Jesse. I'm someone who grew up in the Middle East. I was actually born in Dubai, but then grew up in a refugee camp in Lebanon. I come from a Palestinian descent. Through education and my family having many coincidental small actions here and there, I was able to get out and pursue my education and then follow a career in the corporate world until I had a moment where a voice started telling me to move on and pursue something bigger, something more challenging. Without any clarity of what that was, I followed that voice, and that led me to move to Vancouver, get married, open a business. My business is a restaurant called Aleph Eatery, and it's in East Vancouver. As I was opening the restaurant as well, I had my first child, and that basically dictated the last 6-7 years of my life. And then through a process of grief and loss of my ex-partner, and through just being overwhelmed with work and COVID, I found myself landing on the experience with Steve Austin. I had met Steve actually the first few weeks of opening the restaurant in a fellowship program that someone nominated me to. And as I was opening my restaurant, which was like a complete jump and leap of faith, he reached out to me then a few days later with an email being like, "I love your restaurant, etc., etc." And then one day I heard one of the podcasts that he was on talking about 5-MeO DMT, and everything he said on the podcast sounded like exactly what I needed to experience. And the only thing I could label at the time was I only knew that something inside of me needed to die. So I reached out to him and was like, "I think this is calling me." And then the lead up to it was also more and more events that were adding more content. So yeah, that's how I arrived to it.
Interesting. How was your actual 5-MeO experience? Mind you, I believe you have came to Enfold over a year ago. Is it 2 years now?
2 years. It was November.
Wow.
The experience itself obviously was extremely powerful. I arrived to the island after being in Dubai with my father having a surgery, like a sudden surgery that we weren't planning. So I flew out for the weekend, was with him, then flew back and straight to Vancouver and then Bowen Island. So I knew I was not very grounded. I was even questioning this is a lot to go into right now with having gone home and seen my family that I haven't seen for years. Steve welcomed me so beautifully, and he was aware of that as well, because also the process of getting to the experience, Steve takes really good care about getting to know you and knowing your history and the milestones of your life that affected your life. And also another checkup call before of kind of checking in and how you're doing and if you're ready for it and what your expectations of it are. And this was an important part, the expectations of it, which is what I was saying, the part of me that wanted to die. The arrival, Steve was like, "We're going to leave you to the last person," because we were 4 people. And he's like, "Just spend some time on the island, get grounded." And for me, I was staying in his office, so I was reading some of the books on his shelf. And what caught my attention at the time was that there's a Bible and there's a Kabbalah book. And I was like, there's no Quran. And I was not a religious person. I actually kept religion because I didn't understand it, didn't read enough. I read about religions a lot, but I never read about the religion that I was born in, the faith, which is Islam. Then I found a book that was called No God But God. And I started reading it that morning. And I was like, whoa, this book is beautiful. Like how it's written, how it describes Islam. I kind of left it. And then I went into my experience with Stephen Austin. Steve recommended that because of my history and because of my size, maybe I don't remember, but like he was like, I think you might be okay with doing 4 doses. And for those who don't know, they call the doses, the 3 as like a handshake, a hug, and a full release. And I totally experienced that. Like I 100% experienced. The first dose was so gentle and so nice and so like welcoming, and it was easy to like digest. From the beginning, I started feeling tension in my left shoulder, and my left shoulder has had its share of accidents in the last few years, and I think I held all my tension there and all my grief and all my shame, even everything was like gathering, all my attention was going there. I actually didn't have much of a visual experience. I had more of a body / mental parallel experience. Whatever I was experiencing in my mind and emotionally, I was experiencing in my body. And by the third dose, I felt a sense of completeness, like I was done. And at the time, Steve, because of the knowledge that he had gathered before, he asked me that question. He's like, I'm not trying to like tell you to take the 4th dose or not, but like, do you feel like something died within you? And I was like, no. It was clear that it wasn't. So I took some time. I hung out in the room and walked around and just like settled down. And then I was like, I'm ready. And when I took the 4th dose, that's when the magic happened. The most amazing part was that I ended up on my knees, whether consciously or mostly unconsciously, but I ended up on my knees reciting the 2 most core statements of Islam, which is Allahu Akbar, which is God is bigger than anything. And the second, what led me to it was reciting Alhamdulillah, which is I'm grateful, I'm grateful, I'm grateful, I'm grateful for God, I'm grateful for God. And I was repeating it. And I actually came back from the state of surrender, which I'll describe in a second, but I came back from that state to finding myself consciously on my knees saying that. And also being amazed that like, why the hell am I reciting this? How did I get here? So on the 3rd dose, I was consciously, I'm like, oh, there is resistance. And I think I crossed the barrier of that resistance. But on the 4th dose, I felt a complete surrender. And I think that's what led me to being on my knees, because I think there was a small split second of realizing that surrendering is at the core of Islam. And I think the language that I had to express it was the language that was provided me in my childhood, and I couldn't find anything to express it in a better way. So that was my experience in details.
It's so interesting. Every single person has such a unique experience and like how they respond to it and how their body responds to it. What exactly, if you could articulate in words, like died?
I think I had realized for years, or I've read enough about the ego and a bit about that, like how to manage it. But I kind of also, after reading a lot of Eckhart Tolle, like many years ago, I kind of evolved into understanding that like I can't really fight the ego. Like if I'm fighting him, then I'm feeding it, and like I kind of arrived to that conclusion for myself without like further investigation. But I think I might describe it as death, but what it actually is an actual removal of veils. And I thought that I perceived myself as someone who is very heart driven in some moments of my life. But then I realized exactly how faith is not in the mind, it's in the heart. It's felt in the heart. And that was the transformation from there on for my life. Is once that faith was anchored in my heart, I was like very clear on not necessarily the outcome of my path, but on how to make decisions in my life from there on.
I would say that a lot of people come out of this experience feeling like they have seen their version of God or whatever it might be, in the words that they describe and understand. So it's fascinating. How was your integration after? Was it easy once like you felt like you were able to connect?
I think what started me on the path to arrive to Parmio was immense pain and immense loss. And that was the result of the breakdown and the end of my marriage. there were like a few moments during that last few years where we had attempted to reconcile that marriage, and coming back from 5MEO was not easy. At least the first day was not easy. After arriving back to Vancouver, it was like I don't even know how to describe it. It was like water and oil. Like I was coming back with an abundance of openness and love and experience that is like beyond the physical only. Like it was very metaphysical, right? So I was hoping to be met in that place, and I wasn't, and that created a bigger like pain immediate after an experience like that, which I might not understand the reason behind this pain and why things are not working out when I want them really to work out, and then realizing that like that resistance is probably at the core of it, and letting go and surrendering. And then the process of that was, I mean, I've done it. I've done the experience 2 years ago. I think the year after, I can describe it as a really the most shaping year of my life, because it included so many experiences of pain, grief, loneliness. It had a big range of experiences that were all new to me, and I was experiencing them on my own. And as a result of that, it brought up to the surface a big question of location for me, whether I want to live here or back in the Middle East where I grew up. And I followed that question and I explored it and I sat with it. And then I came back with the knowledge that I want to be here. Those were all decisions that I was making based on that faith and that experience of my body that now taught me how to say yes or no better than before, and how to know whether this is something I want or something I don't want. I think within us, there's a consciousness and a voice that tells us whether we're doing something right or wrong. And I use that voice as what I label as the voice of God. And I select that because I've concluded, at least for now, that this is what keeps Haitham over the ground and elevated and able to serve his people and be there for his people and be there for himself and be safe within himself again. Like I see God in every experience. I see God in this moment as well. The blessings are there. I think the biggest blessing of life is life itself and being alive.
I love that. And I agree. It's like very similar. Like prayer is just another practice for you to connect back to self and to something greater than yourself, is what it sounds like. Um, as well as, I think, and maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but your big truth or the thing that really shifted for you was that safety in yourself after 5MEO and feeling like connected more to yourself and to the world and to abundance.
The start point was 5MEO. And then the point of reference that was established because of 5MEO became the guiding compass.
Totally. Yes. I mean, I think that's something that needs to be like shouted to the back for everybody doing psychedelics, is that like it's not the actual psychedelic that is doing any of this for people afterwards. It's actually just like the experience you feel, the connection to something greater, and then reintegrating that feeling back into your life somehow, day over day, moment over moment, of like remembering who your true self is, right? And 2 years out, how are you feeling about it? Do you think that you would ever feel called to go back to the medicine, or are you more just enjoying your like practices and self and shifting this way?
Right now, I just am reaping kind of the results of it, and we can talk about it all intangibly and keep it in the metaphysical or like, but there's also the practical on the everyday. And I think one of the best examples to show the difference in who I have become is I had to do a big construction job at the restaurant, like renovation, that was a result of a flood, unexpected, and that required the big investment that I didn't have. And I intentionally went to that experience with the complete surrendering. Like I was intentionally being, annoyingly even being, that like everything's gonna work out. Like the team was looking at me being like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Everything's gonna work out." You know, in comparison to the first time when I built the restaurant, the amount of stress and panic that I lived in for a whole year like it was almost like I was feeding my misery. And in this last experience during renovation, it ended up in unfolding in the most beautiful way. It took only 4 days, and it was just like ease throughout.
Completely agree with that. Like coming out of 5, it's like you kind of just like surrender yourself to that experience, to any experience that comes your way. It's just understanding that you try to just have faith that it'll work out, and that you have the autonomy to decide how you want to interact in each interaction you have. Any like when things are going great, when things are going bad, it's like you get to decide how you want to be in those moments. What would you give advice to somebody going, like, if you heard somebody's going to go to Enfold next week, what would be something you would let them know?
I think it's a process of following every prompt from your body and being curious about it. Like, I light up when I describe it. It's such a visceral experience that I think we are hungry for in our society and in our lives. I think what I would say to anyone is like, go with your full heart.
That's beautiful, and like people should honor also their experience, right? So it's like if they're feeling positive or negative during it all, it's like just understand that, like, just trust yourself, like that is like what is supposed to unfold, as well as, yeah, don't be, it doesn't box you into like what you thought you were supposed to be. Like it sounds like you're open to the idea that, like, yeah, your life, also the way you speak, you're like, this is for now, like you can't speak for future Haitham, but this is what's working. um and it makes you feel good.
You're talking to someone who I could have never imagined myself that my day would wake up, pray, breath work. I like shifted so many things in my life. Like I started loving my body to the point where I'm taking good care of it and like honoring it and like really like almost like babysitting it and like understanding that that's the only thing I can take care of anyway.
Beautiful. Compassionately nurturing and caring for yourself. It's like we do it often for other people, most people at least. But self-love is one of the hardest things to do. It's so easy to love others, but it's so much harder to like sit and love yourself and treat yourself in the way that will best support yourself, like eating healthy, doing the things that need to be done.
I would have never thought this version of myself I could love that much, which includes many things that I would have held so much judgment about before, or I would have not allowed myself to be, or to act that way, or to say the things that I say right now, right? In all my relationships, friends, family, work, and intimate relationships. Those 4 have all shifted for me. They've all been reconnected to Haytham's core. Like they're now connected from a new place. And that is the blessing. I think that has been the biggest blessing where I'm like, okay, I know what I bring into a room and I know what is needed from me in this room. The first time I actually saw my sister, my eldest sister since Palestinian, when she hugged me, she actually just like sighed and she said, the bringer of feelings. Like she actually said that. Like I started recognizing that within myself after 5MEO as well. Is that like, oh, like that's the voice that I bring into a room, is that like I remind people of what they feel and that they're entitled to feel their full range of feelings, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can be a testament to that, but we won't get into that. I just want to say thank you, first of all, for like sharing so openly, and um, you've taught me so much just by like the few interactions we've had. And a big shout out to Aleph Eatery if you're in Vancouver. You guys have amazing food. And yeah, I don't know. Is there any last words you want to say, Haitham?
First of all, thank you, but that's part of going to the Enfold retreats that you would get to try Aleph's food as well, and the sides that Austin
Yeah.
makes are always delicious too. So like, shout out to Steve and Austin again. Like, since we have talked about all of this, for creating such a beautiful space. I'm sure everyone who goes there experiences the awe of the place and the energy around it, and the hospitality and the gentleness and safety you feel there to be at whatever point you are in your life.
Thanks for listening to the Still In It podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you're interested in hearing more, the best thing you could do is to leave us a review. This allows us to continue to record and inform others on the 5MEO experience. If you want to join our beloved community or learn more about us, feel free to visit us at enfold.org. That is enfold.org.